My name is Christian. You might have recognized me if you've been to any other Qt webinars. I'm part of the marketing team at Qt, and welcome to today's product talk, which is going to be centered around blocking bad bots and bringing Qt best practices for those high demand events. As typically, we will be recording today's webinar, so you can go back and review later or share with a colleague who might have missed it. We usually get that out a day or two afterwards. And we do have time, as always, as well, set aside for Q&A. Again, as mentioned, my name is Christian. I work on content and product marketing side of things, so I'm really do a lot of work on explaining Qt features and functionality and making sure that you all are making the most out of the tool that is Qt. And I'm joined by Jose. Jose, could you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Jose here. Great to see or to see your names and the locations across the world. I'm the VP of Technical Engagement here at Qt. What my teams do is, among other things, the integration. So if you are our customer, someone from my team has worked with you to integrate our system into your infrastructure. We also do support. And that's kind of with that experience that I'm here to contribute to this webinar. I'm very happy to be here.
Great, thanks for being on board, Jose, and up for the task. A brief rundown of what we'll be discussing today. 5 minutes or so, just understanding a little bit the scope of the problem that we're going to be talking about. Then another five minutes or so, just situating, okay, bad bot mitigation there's a lot of tools out there. It's a busy landscape for good reason, as we'll explain. How does Qt fit into that picture? And then the meat of the presentation will be section 3 there, what the best-in-class Qt setup looks like. And if you can't reach it fully, we also are going to walk through the building blocks that make up to it so you can take action pretty immediately to already start hardening your setup. And finally, the Q&A at the end with Jose and myself. So Jose, how about we start off with just understanding the bad bot problem a little bit from the Qt perspective?
Yep, let's start on in that area. And just to set the context here, right? So over the past decade, we've worked with a lot of traffic and high traffic sales and registrations, and that gives us a unique vantage point to see what's going on behind the scenes during these sales, right? And particularly, specifically talking here around the bad bots and malicious traffic that we see in those sales. But we see pretty much everything in the spectrum, from just tech-savvy users that have some scripts going to very sophisticated scalper bots that are operated by big technology organizations, you could say. And their aim, wherever they are in the spectrum, is always to get an advantage over the genuine users.
That's right. Just to kind of make this a little more concrete, pulling back the curtain, as Jose said, we kind of have insight into this from many of the customers we're working with. A sneaker drop, limited edition sneaker drop from a household brand that you all would know. What did their drop look like? So they had 1.7 million visitors in 1 hour, hitting the sale from over 500,000 IP addresses. Over a 10-minute period, there was a sustained traffic of 80,000 visitors per minute versus the 1,500, which was the max outflow setting in Qt. So that's basically what we can assume the capacity that the customer determined was sustainable, that the systems would work fine under. So 53 times higher, and over 95% of the traffic was coming from malicious users or bad bots. And so just to give a little bit of a sense of scale of what many of you are up against, and yes, this is just a sneaker drop, but we see it across e-commerce. We see it in ticketing, of course, as well. And even sometimes in government registrations, there were bots used in getting coronavirus vaccination appointments. So really anywhere where there is essentially a supply-demand mismatch, right? And the two main attack vectors are speed and volume. Right, the bots are faster than any genuine users. They're going to be able to grab up all the inventory that they can, and they'll span many virtual users to be able to do that. So as I mentioned, you see that in ticket on sales, you see that in product drops like the one we just highlighted. in even the government registrations. But really anywhere there's a limited supply or high demand, and especially if there's a high resale potential. And, I think most of you are joining because you understand, I would assume that you're understanding the problem, right? But sometimes we do hear, like, okay, how bad of a problem is it if we're selling, a sale is a sale type of sense. But the reality is that bad bots cost businesses about 3.6 of their total revenue on average, according to industry research. Um, so it's kind of like a wet blanket that lies over everything. So we can look at it from extra load and crashes, right? The multiplier effect we saw earlier, 53x, just adds fuel to the fire, can lead to crashes there. The lost business intelligence when you're selling to a bot, you don't really know who the true end customer is, that you're able to enroll them in marketing flows and understand their purchasing history, so that you can tailor the marketing to them. Skewed analytics for poor business decision making. Any operational and support costs from canceling those bot orders post sale, which is pretty common if we're not able to control the bots coming in, or increased, support tickets if there are website problems because of the extra bot load. Ultimately, that all flows into this sort of undermine fairness and brand trust, which is maybe feels a little more difficult to quantify in some way, but in reality, it's really sort of very core business metrics, right? That customers lose faith that you're looking after those genuine loyal customers, if bad bots are able to get through to the sale in large quantities.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. I think it's a really nice kind of introduction to the severity of the problem and its impact on business, right? And I would just like to then now take some time to talk about how Qt supports a multi-layered approach in this area, right? But I would also like to start by saying that if you're joining this webinar in the hopes that you would get one solution to fix it once and for all, I'm afraid that, and I'm sorry, but I'll have to disappoint you, right? There's no silver bullet solution in this game, but there are good news, and the good news is that the more layers of protection that you have, the better, right? So that's here why we're talking about a multi-layered approach. So if you think about it, if you think that if you have 4 layers of protection, and if each layer is weeding out 50% of bots coming to it, actually in the end, only 6% are going through, right? You have blocked 94%. So it's very important to have this multi-layered approach, and we will talk about that from different perspectives.
That's right. I was just gonna write to Jeff in the chat. Had the same thought that he did, of one product to rule them all. But alas, there is not one silver bullet, as Jose mentioned, to rule the bots. But a little bit, as Jose mentioned there, is kind of setting the context, right? It's a big, busy bot mitigation landscape. An analogy I like to use to help understand this is if we look at the analogy of boarding an aircraft, right, in an airport. So the flow, you would enter the airport, you would be in the lobby, you would then go through a security checkpoint, where then only after that point it's all kind of verified passengers, right? And then you're boarding on, and there's another check there before you get onto your plane. So if you think about from a security standpoint in the lobby, right, there's dogs, there's video surveillance, there are police around. So there's security there. But then you have the security checkpoint, which provides a unique point where it's filtering everyone who is a passenger, make sure there's several types of checks. So ID verification, passport, boarding pass, X-ray of your bag, body scan, random checks, right? And it creates a secure enclosed zone from that part forward. And then you get into the boarding part as well. And so basically, in the analogy here, in a product drop or ticket sale, the lobby is kind of coming to the general website. Then Qt is serving as that security checkpoint, kind of filtering all of the traffic that's going through, enabling the time, like decreasing the speed advantage basically, and making sure there's time to really thoroughly vet and validate every passenger or customer. And then as you get through kind of in this analogy, the boarding of the plane would be the completing of the transaction, right? so that's a little bit just one way. We might circle back to it, or we will circle back to it a little bit later when we describe the full flow that we're presenting. Um,
Yeah,
but just
Christian,
wanted to,
and just
yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
to add there is that kind of, also going back to the multi-layered approach, right? That with Qt we support that multi-layered approach at a couple levels. So if you can think about it, it's kind of, you think about it as layers all the way down, right? Qt itself can be a layer in a multi-layered approach, but ourselves, even within Qt, within our product, we do have several layers as well, and we will touch upon that in this webinar as well.
Exactly. Just like the security checkpoint is one step in the broader flow, but at the security checkpoint, there are several checks going on. I think it's a great point to say. So now that we've discussed a little bit about sort of understanding the bad bot problem, a little bit of a sense of scope, right? Then we've just discussed high level with an analogy, kind of how Qt fits into the bot mitigation picture. Now we're going to look at the best-in-class setup. We're going to start with the sort of, yeah, gold standard, the top most secure setup, if we want to say. So if there is one thing that you pay attention to in this webinar, these next 5-7 minutes, be sure to tune in. That said, we will also cover afterwards the building blocks that lead up to it, right? Because we understand it might not be possible for everyone from tomorrow to implement this setup. We did want to start with it, but then we also will go through the building blocks to make sure you're able to work your way towards it. So to start off, the assumed flow here for a scheduled sale or registration, right? That's where we see often that mismatch in supply or demand. You could think of, yeah, product drop or ticket on sale, for example. So the user journey would basically be that the visitor will visit the site and they'll log in to their account. So we're assuming a kind of a gated sale here. They'll then proceed to the landing page or the PDP. They'll then enter the waiting room in a pre-queue mode, right? So there's that countdown to the start of the sale. Then they'll be randomized, shuffled, put into the queue, where they get the estimated wait time, they get the progress bar, all of that informed wait. And then they are redirected to the transactional site where they complete their purchase. So this is the kind of flow that we're going to be working with here in the next couple minutes.
Yes, thank you, Christian. And then starting a little bit on the login part, and if you're looking at this and saying, oh, but I don't have a login in front of my sales, then hang in there. We also will touch on an alternative in case that is the case. But where we see here in the best-in-class setup is that we do have the login as an important part of this setup, of this flow. And what we do here is that we are ensuring that the visitor is a non-customer, right? And we say we, but in this case, it actually be on your side, right? On your website, you have your customer account. We are just suggesting that part is part of this whole flow. So we start with the login. This will already help kind of weed out a good chunk of bots, but it's also not a full solution, right? So there will be a fight in the layer around account creation, right? So that's back to the multi-layers component.
Yep, that's a great point. So now logged in user is trying to, they get logged in, they navigate to the page for the sale, and they're just about to enter the pre-queue, enter the waiting room. So that's when you can run challenges on them, similar to that security checkpoint in the airport, right? So it could be based on HTTP header, IP address, data center traffic. Visitors who fail the challenge will be blocked, or you could choose to hard block certain traffic if they meet those parameters. That they could be blocked outright. So first, those sort of challenges are run to make sure that they are a genuine visitor, meeting the specs that you outlined. And then this is, there is a key there. This, I would say, is the key to this entire flow, is when the logged in visitor successfully enters the waiting room, they are assigned a queue token that contains a unique visitor identifier. So that could be whatever they use to log in is probably the best example. So either that's a member ID or an email, but something that's unique to them and that is in the queue token. So that helps ensure this reinforced enclosed flow, which we'll elaborate on in a second. But what it also ensures is that there's only one spot in the pre-queue per unique ID, right? So they could try and open, they could log in on several devices. They're logged into their same account. They're just going to get that one spot in the pre-queue.
That's right, Christian, and that's quite important when thinking about kind of mitigating the volume advantage that bots might have, right? So in this case, it's the same key will only give you one place in queue, so we're mitigating that volume.
Great
And
point.
now the user is in pre-queue, right? So they have been forwarded to the waiting room. We are in pre-queue. The countdown for the start of the sale is running. And what happens is that when you go from a pre-queue state to queue at the time of the sale start, everyone that is in pre-queue is their place in the queue is being randomized, right? So that's important to ensure that we're actually reducing the speed advantage from the bots, because there's no advantage whether you come in the very beginning of the pre-queue or at the very end of the pre-queue. As long as you're joining the queue during the pre-queue phase, you'll have the same chances as anyone else to kind of at a good place when you get into the queue, right? So this is an important mechanism to ensure the speed advantage gets mitigated from the bot's speed advantage.
Exactly. It's no longer a game of milliseconds, right? So
Yeah.
say.
And then once we're going to kind of jumping a little bit from the waiting time, right? So then once the user goes through the queue, and I see, Jeff, that you do have a question there. We'll pick it up later. But once the user goes through the queue, right, it will be redirected back to what we're calling here the transaction part of the website. So that's your website, the transaction area. And here the idea is that you can also leverage some of our functionality to ensure a couple of things, right? We can, by calling the Qt API, you can verify that the user that is in that transaction page is the same user. It's the same ID that went all the way from the login, redirected to the queue, and then back to the website, right? So that's quite important that we're able to close the loop that way. So it's as we see a very effective method of ensuring that we have a closed flow there and mitigate a lot of the bot attack vectors. And the next step on it is around the kind of what we call the action of canceling the token. So here what happens is that we also have the capability of kind of you can use some of our mechanisms as well to cancel that specific token. So if you do have the decision that you only want each user that goes through the waiting room to purchase, check out something once and only once, then you can actually cancel that token once they do that, finalize that purchase. That means that if maybe they would still be able to go for another purchase, depends on your design in the end, but that means that they would have to go through the whole flow again and not just back to the transaction side.
Yeah,
there's
right.
more variants there, but this is kind of very much the best in class setup that we wanted to share with you.
Yeah, and on that API call, sorry if you did say that, Jose, but both it ensures that that they have been through the waiting room, like so that all visitors have been through that flow, that someone didn't somehow skip around, which we have other methods for preventing that as well, but also that they are purchasing with the same credentials that they logged in with and they entered the waiting room with. Right. So it really locks it down in that way too. And I think it's just an important thing to call out specifically or remind on that API call. It's quite important to do that check before the purchase and ensure that enclosed loop.
Exactly. Thanks, Christian.
And kind of again circling back to analogy, hopefully you won't hate me. I think this is the last time I'm gonna reference it. But again, here we can think it flows pretty well where you have sort of at the account verification here, similar to when you go to the check-in counter at the airport, they ask you for your ID, your passport, and your ID or boarding card, sorry. Then again, at the security checkpoint, you're asked for those same visitor identification, just like you are when you're getting into the QIT's waiting room. And again, you're checked right before you board your plane, which, as we established, was kind of the transaction in that analogy. And you're doing the same thing here with the QIT API, making sure that they still have those. It's still the same person with the same passport and boarding card, or boarding pass, or in this case, right, the same credentials that they've used. And again, that kind of creates that whole enclosed flow.
And on the next slide is just as I promised in a few minutes ago, if you do not have the login, or if that's something that you're not ready to add as part of the flow, we do have what we call an invite only waiting room. And so basically what we are doing here, you could think about it as kind of outsourcing the verification part to us, right? In the sense that you could, for example, upload a list of unique identifiers. So those unique identifiers are similar to those we were talking about in the previous example. It could be an email. You can actually upload a list of those emails to us, and it's actually when visitors, when the users are accessing the queue, we would be doing that email verification for you, right? It can also be done as two-factor authentication, so that we are verifying that they do own that email address. So it was just to share a little bit of a variation of the best-in-class setup that we were just sharing, in case you do not have the possibility, or right now is not the right time to go with the full-on kind of login and adding the ID key in the enqueue token. Right, and maybe one final thing. Oh, Christian, one final thing, just to kind of wrap up here on the best case or the best-in-class setup, is that this is kind of a combination of some work, some development required from your side, right? So before entering the queue and after, kind of when leaving the queue, kind of combined with the features and functionality that we provide on both sides. So it's usually the best way to do this is a collaboration between some of our engineers and someone on your team to get to this setup.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jose. So just if we kind of digest a little bit, there's a lot of stuff we walked through there. Outcomes of what this best-in-class setup helped us achieve. So it was a reinforced enclosed flow where only the desired visitors enter the waiting room. All right, we had those challenges. We had to check to make sure they were logged in. And only those who have passed through the waiting room can complete the transactions. And then some achievements coming out of that. The virtual waiting room itself as a core product helped prevent some of those bot-induced crashes, payment errors, overselling that we see with the 53x, some of the scale of what the bot traffic can do. Of course, together also with the login mechanism and stuff that we've talked about. Then it helped mitigate bots' speed and volume advantages by forcing all traffic through the virtual waiting room, that security checkpoint, and injecting multiple kind of checks to filter out the bots against their volume advantage, and then running it in that scheduled pre-queue setting where we're cutting it back on the speed advantage, right? Again, it's not a game of milliseconds that a bot who has an account can still, if it was running a purely first in, first out, could still potentially gain an unfair advantage. And ultimately delivering trusted visitors with a fair, transparent, and reliable experience. And this was kind of a schematic, sort of a diagram. So how did it look? But I want to just bring in a specific concrete case of this being executed by one of our customers. In this case, they used the invite-only setup that Jose mentioned through at the end there, with the invite-only waiting room functioning as the verification step instead of the account login. So this was a top ticketing company selling tickets for a massive global artist. You will all have known both names, 100%. And the resale potential was very high, right? There's a lot of scrutiny, a lot of eyeballs. So they knew that bots were going to be a big problem. So this is a little bit what the pre-queue looked like, the pre-queue into the waiting room, and this is over, let's say, a 3.5 hour period. And there were 138,000, so about 140,000 visitors who were granted access to the queue just across that time span. But Jose.
Exactly. But so I think 140,000, it's already quite a good number, right? But I think that if we then look, I don't know if it's under the hood or under the line, and we see that it's actually 3.2 million requests that actually got their access denied, then we can see the magnitude of the problem, right? So it's 24 times the number of verified visitors that we actually ended up denying the access. And then if we actually double click on those just for a little bit more information, right? We can see that the ones that granted access was this 138,000. Then on top of that, we had around out of those 3.2 million that we talked about, just around 1 million failed that the verification. Then we had around 1 million as well that actually failed to solve the capture challenge that was put to them. And then finally, we did have then just over 1 million, maybe 1.2, 1.5, that actually got denied access because there was a specific rule in what we call traffic access rules. We'll talk a little bit about that. That made it that the traffic was just denied. So yeah, quite some big numbers there.
Yeah, the pretty big scale. Interesting to see it from behind the curtain, so to speak. And again, similar things here to what we described as sort of the, let's say, theoretical achievements or the outcomes of that setup. This is very concrete, right? So the exclusive access for only those invited visitors. Each fan only got one spot in the queue. The wait times were also shortened by 50% because the queue wasn't full of fake customers or unwanted visitors. The load on the servers was cut by 95%, right? Because it didn't have to deal with the 3.2 million requests. It just was able to focus on the who were blocked even by by Qt in that verification of the invite only waiting room. So the servers could focus on the hard work of just the 140,000 visitors. As we mentioned, over 3 million bots blocked in general, and thousands of genuine fans walked away with tickets to see one of their favorite artists.
So, as you promised, Christian, we're also talking a little bit about the building blocks for success in the bot mitigation world, right? And we did start with the best in class setup, but some of you might be thinking, okay, I remember there was 27% that were in the kind of beginning of the bot journey, right? So it might feel quite overwhelming to look at that setup. So is there anything else, or how do I start, right? And the good news here is that having the fact that it is a multi-layered approach, it also means that it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. So you can start by adding some layers one at a time and also see and start, I guess, experimenting as well, looking at the data and seeing what works best, and what else should be done. So there's definitely steps, and we'll take you through a few of those.
Yeah, great point, Jose. And if we could just kind of map out on a grid a little bit, sort of level of bot protection on the y-axis, different products on the x. If we look at just virtual waiting room as a core product, right, that helps with one aspect of the bot problem, which is those crashes or web performance issues from the massive spike of traffic, right? So just that alone can cause really drastic problems. The 53 times that we saw in that case study from earlier in the presentation. So that's sort of a fundamental layer of protection or mitigation in itself.
Yes, and then we also have one block around the edge connectors, right? What we see definitely from a best-in-class perspective due to the performance and the resilience and I would say the simplicity as well of integrating it is that having an edge connector to ensure that the queue is not skippable is a very good building block as well.
Yep, yeah, pretty much. If you're having any problems with bots, I think that's really a must-have. Um, Then next we talked again, it was included in the best in class example, the scheduled waiting room, and that provides that randomization, which in a unique way helps tackle the speed advantage of that programmatic, way that bots are able to go through at lightning speed.
Yeah, and then the traffic access rules that I alluded to in one of the previous slides. So this allows you to, in our platform, to adjust the rules and how you want to challenge or hard block some of the traffic depending on specific parameters. It's very, say, intuitive and flexible as well.
Yep, then we have the invite-only waiting room, which is placed a little bit up here because, as we showed in one of the alternatives to the best-in-class setup, is that it has that verification mechanism kind of built in, right? You're uploading a list of your customers. You're focusing on letting in the good customers instead of trying to beat down all the bots. So it's a little bit of a flip of a mindset and a powerful one to help in the bot mitigation process.
And then the visitor identification, right? So that's basically the feature underlying our best-in-class setup that we shared earlier with the user identifier across the journey, ensuring a closed loop, and with that mitigating both speed and volume advantages that bots might have, and additionally potentially also enforcing purchase limits.
That's right. And lastly we're working on tight integrations with third-party bot tools. In this particular case, we have a product called Hype Event Protection, which is working together with Akamai's bot manager product. So if you are an Akamai bot manager customer, what you can do is that you can continue to feed that bot score that Akamai's bot manager is assigning to visitors. You can feed that into Qt. You can even utilize the pre-queue time as additional telemetry, so that you're able to that accuracy of the identification of who's a bot and who's not will go up even more. We've seen some really impactful initial numbers on that. And then what happens when that randomization happens? It's only then that the bots will know that they've been flagged as a bot because they get an error where everyone else will get passed through to the queue phase. And if they did want to try and get back in to the sale, they would be placed at the end of the line because at the queue phase, it's working on a first in, first out um, basis. So it's really a powerful tool. And if you are an Akamai bot manager customer, someone using that, definitely it's something to look into.
Yeah, so just summarizing this last couple of sections, what we see the best-in-class setup for mitigation is with visitor identification. It is the setup that we share with you. But however, I also add that we also offer many options to harden your setup. And I would say, even if you do have the best-in-class, I think complementing it, adding some of the other layers like traffic access rules and some of the other things, it's also very useful. So back to as many layers as possible.
Yeah. And now I'm going to pivot just briefly for the last, let's say, 3 minutes of the content, and then we're going to jump into the questions. But discussion so far has been very much around mitigation. In reality, there's two sides to the coin, right? To be able to mitigate, you have to be able to detect. You have to know what's going on. And we hear from a lot of customers, some of you who also answered the poll, right, that it's murky at best, maybe the idea or the visibility into how bad the bot traffic or bot problem is. And I can say for sure from our experience, even customers who feel like they have a really good understanding of it, if they're then becoming a Qt customer and running one of these hype sales, they always come away with an additional learning or something that they weren't aware of before. So did want to highlight briefly the reporting functionality within Qt that can help shine a light on that bot problem that they can circle back or loop back into the mitigation tactics we've been talking about thus far.
Yeah, and just a couple of examples, Christian. Then one of them is actually around the inflow patterns, right? And in our experience, there's a significant difference between a normal, would say, a standard inflow when there's a sale, and some other types that it could be, as you see here in the second case, very up and down, up and down. That's not very, say, natural if it's the kind of real users that are accessing the sale, or as you also see in the third example, the one lower, actually such a sudden drop in inflow as well. So that's some kind of signals that you can start getting when looking at the inflow patterns in your event. However, it's just one data point, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bot, and this case in point here, that this was a case where there was a peak. You could see a strong peak in inflow. However, it was not a bot. It was actually a marketing campaign in TikTok that was driving that inflow. So at first look, it sounded suspicious, but then when you look into more details that our dashboards also can help with, then you could see, oh, okay, this was actually the marketing campaign. So not in this case, not a bot.
Yeah, and I think that marketing team got a talking to because this was on the big trading day of the year for this our customer. So that was not part of the plan, but they were able to deduce that and then able to plan for the future based on that. There's also sort of automated threat detection and real-time notification of unusual traffic behavior within Traffic Insights. So you can get flagged aggressive IP addresses and unexpected levels of data center traffic. So a little bit of proactive notification as well. And then you are also able, there's a bots and abuse dashboard in Traffic Insights and Reporting. We're able to understand how and why traffic is being flagged as bots, especially around those traffic access rules that we talked about earlier, and get valuable data into how many bots you're blocking, which tactics are working, right? So it's kind of a feedback loop back into the mitigation steps. There's one thing, if me and Jose are here talking about this, I think it's always another when you get to hear from a peer Qt customer. So this quote is here from Elaine, and I think it's really nice, kind of sums up nicely there at the UK's Home Office using Qt with digital applications for passports. And she talks about here how the analytics gave them visibility and the flexibility to act fast. So both having the insight into the traffic and then also being able to take some mitigation steps around it. A nice sum up of kind of what we've just talked about and the two sides of the coin.
And summarizing then, we just showed you a little peek at Traffic Insights and Reporting and how it can complement your bot mitigation work. And it's something that we use every time that we are ourselves helping our customers understand their traffic and if there might be something. So it's a great way to look at both during the event, but also post-event to analyze what happened.
Yep, and that's right. So to sort of sum up, if we're thinking of kind of an action for you, talk if you're interested in some of this best-in-class setup or even some of those building blocks, talk with your customer success manager about edge connectors. There's bots and abuse packages involved, Traffic Insights Premium and invite-only waiting rooms, and a special or a specific shout out if you are or a call if you're using Akamai's Bot Manager to learn about the hype event protection is a very powerful tool as well. That's the end of the content. Thank you for sticking around. I know it was maybe a lot. Hopefully you remember that best-in-class setup. But now we'll jump into the questions. And let's see here. There was a question. Thank you, Jeff. There's a couple in the chat here.
Yeah.
Can't we do first in, first out with bots at the end? This was, I think, when we first showed the flow.
Yeah, and I can take that, Christian, because
Yeah.
I will actually take it together with the other one from Jeff on when will a hype event be GA or generally available. So it's actually the around the first in first out with bots at the end. It's actually an interesting idea. That's something that I would say the closest we have to that is actually with hype event. That as Christian mentioned, that it's actually that the bots at the end, it's actually taking that a little bit further. So actually, if you know it's bots, they are not even getting through, right? But it's only at that randomization part from pre-queue to queue that they will find out that they have not made it. So it's I think a little bit in line with your thought there, Jeff.
Yeah.
I appreciate the questions.
Yeah.
And I do not have I don't know if you have, Christian. I think you might have to go back to product. I don't have a date for when it will be GA, but definitely something that we can get back to you on.
No, yep, exactly. And I think one of the interesting things too about that not telling the bots, that's a big problem, right? If you block a bot, it just they spin it up again and comes right back at you. So I think it's quite an elegant solution that it's delaying the kind of they don't find out and have to have all these bots running concurrently until the randomization happens, they've blocked and it's too late. So quite a cool
Yeah.
feature. But definitely it's not in GA yet, but it is available to already start implementing and reach out to your customer success manager about that. All right,
We
let's
have
see here.
we
How
have
do
one
we?
more. We have one question in the Q&A
Sure,
part
let's take that.
from.
Yep, let's take that one. We'll come back
Yeah.
to another question
I'm
if
trying to take them by chronological order.
yes.
So Kyle was asked if there's a best practice for implementing the known customer step if using an edge connector, right? So talking about the best in case setup that we talked about in the login. That's how I interpret the question. And the good news is that I would say that having the edge connector, that's also why we talked about it as the building block. That was the one that puts you in the best place to actually get to that best in class setup. So we do have best practices there for how to add the unique identifier in the token as Christian was talking about, and then leveraging making the API calls at the end as well. So do reach out and Kyle, and we'll happy to have a discussion about that.
Yep, I just wanted to go back to this
Yeah.
because I figured there might be questions around this, so it might be helpful to have this set up
Thank
there.
you.
Then we have a question from Chris. How do we prevent queue stuffing as queue stuffing takes away the speed and volume gains of Qt? Bots can also create millions of logins.
Yeah, that's also a good question, Chris. And it's back to there not being a silver bullet and back to the multi-layers, right? So in this case, we Qt specifically, we don't have features to help at that layer, right? So that's where the multi-layer with Qt being one of them helps. And in our experience, it is, I would say, easier to fight at that level at the account creation than it is to fight at kind of event time when traffic is coming in. But having said that, it's by no means a walk in the park. So it's definitely potential with other bot protection mechanisms there for account creation that would help.
And a little bit on the queue stuffing or taking multiple spots in the queue, because that's also an important part of that visitor identification key, right? That you need to have a separate account to get another spot in line. So you really need a huge volume of accounts, whereas otherwise there could have been if you're using different devices, then you could get multiple spots in the pre-queue. So that helps eliminate that problem, at least. And I remember actually important. I think it might have even been from the same ticketing case study I showed you data from, but there was one person in particular we could see that tried to open 32,000, I want to say 32,000 browser versions of the queue, browser sessions rather, and they just kept getting the same spot in queue because it was tied to their unique identification, right? So it just shows some of the lengths that the botters are trying to do, and they were a little baffled by that one because that was one of the first on sales we ran with that setup. But a little bit speaks to that problem, which is a very real one.
And we also have one follow-up question or one more question from Jeff around asking, can you send a header with Qt bot confidence to the next hop? I think that's something that we could definitely would say discuss, but it would be very much. I think the best is to have a connect and talk about that in Turkish if that's something that we can get to and how we could work together to achieve that.
And then we have another here. Any good recommendations for account verification services? Still looking for a good way to limit one person to one account.
So I think here I would say, so back to ideally, or let's say the closest that one would be to a best-in-class setup is if you already have a login. So if you already have a customer account that you can then rely on and say enforce that a customer or the user, right, needs to log in before going to the sale. If you don't have that, as we talked about, one of the alternatives would be to use the invite only waiting room on our side. That could help with that, but that would still mean that you still need a customer email to use that in the list. Yeah, and as you're saying, Mark, I think it was also Jeff's point that people do create 100 of accounts, so that's back to the layers and the fact that there's no silver bullet there. But I think we could follow up with you, Mark, to see if there's anything more. I think it might depend a little bit on the exact situation, but back to third-party bot mitigation tools that I know are also able to help in that area. Thanks for the questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you all for the question. It's always I really appreciate all these questions, having a dynamic conversation here at the end.
Thank you for everyone's time. We appreciate it. I know that for some of you might have been early, some of you might have been late. Appreciate your time and very happy to share our experience in this area. And do reach out if you want to talk some more about this. Always happy to talk about this area.
Yep. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jose Odekedat. Thank you for joining me today, and to everyone joining, thank you for your time, and hope you have a happy and healthy end to 2024 and a good start to 2025.